into yours.
I think it's fine.
Oh, for now, yeah. Thank you.
I just wanted to introduce myself in person. Thank you all for, I was just telling Mama, like, this is such a bomb to the soul just to even be here. I appreciate the opportunity to speak, but just being in a room. Thank you. Everyone is so gratifying and healing in a way. So thank you all for everything. I can't imagine how much work it's been, and it's it's so appreciated.
Honestly, like everybody stepped up and
Yeah.
did an amazing.
And I'm based in Florida. I'm kind of on an island there, so I'm happy to support anyway. Phenomena knows I've talked to you about a little bit, so I wanted to kind of just introduce myself to you and say it's the most important thing. So I'm so much. Yeah. So thank and let's get here active. Thank you.
Oh, here's a map. Okay, when you get a moment.
Hi. Yeah. No, I can configure بس بدي عماد. He needs to log in or connect to me here. Karama, we need to charge your laptop. Oh. I can have it as one. It's impossible to do بدنا extension cord. هذا شاحن هذا. Yeah, but how does it? عماد؟ يا عماد. Yeah, it's charging. Can you call it? عماد؟ Oh, it's charging. Yeah. عماد؟ عماد؟ ناديه فراغ. وينه؟ هيو. مين بيدابلس؟
So that's for 4 p.m.
Okay,
and the other are after lunch, so nothing right now.
okay,
So we
cool.
can check.
Let me double check. I'm sure that I got it.
The dark. Is there any other way? This is Mac, I can add wrong.
No, it's actually, I am on this is, the Mac is, for, amazing. I can,
We can,
I have the one for,
What's for your even? So can, yeah, can you log in the Zoom, so? Oh, you need to get the ID lot.
John.
Okay.
okay. That's understanding. And then.
Did you rather make it?
Hmm?
Would you rather make it?
No, because he was working. He rented a car even and he was gonna leave, but then he finished work late, so he's like.
Let me in, Mister.
"Send them."
Let me in.
How do I let you in? Oh, you're an attendee? Oh, okay. Well, I can't do it until we start. Should I start then?
Sure, let's go ahead and just. Yeah, come on, Mama. والله. It's so funny.
It's so good. She coming?
Yeah, but أنا بالأكل.
Oh, wow.
She wants to help with like serving and stuff. Like,
Amazing.
yeah, أنت بس اقعدي. Okay.
Okay. I can charge Karama's laptop. So. Okay. Hello? I know it's not working.
Hello, hello. Is this working? Is working?
Can everybody hear me? Okay. So I'm very pleased to introduce the next panel titled Global Health Failures in the Prevention of Genocide and the Weaponization of Disease. The moderator for this panel is my friend, Dr. Yiping Ji, who's a primary care physician and public health practitioner based in the traditional unceded and unsurrendered territory of Algonquin, Anishinaabe, also known as Ottawa, Canada. In his clinical practice, he works in family medicine practice and refugee health at a community health center and also in Indigenous primary health care. He has worked on and studied the structural and colonial determinants of health in both the settler colonial context of the so-called Canada and occupied Palestine. Thank you so much. Please go ahead.
Now it's on. So we'll jump right into introducing our panelists. So on my far left, so your right, we have Dr. Yara Ali. at the School of Global Health Management and Informatics at the University of Central Florida in the United States. She serves as co-director of the Palestine Program for Health and Human Rights, and is also a non-resident fellow at the Arab Center, Washington, D.C., a non-resident fellow at Dawn MENA, and a 2020-2021 U.S. Fulbright Scholar to the West Bank. Her research agenda focuses on health, human rights, and development in conflict-affected and fragile settings. Her first book, How War Kills: The Overlooked Threats to Our Health, Johns Hopkins University Press, was published in January 2024. She is the recipient of the 2024 Victor Seidel and Barry Levy Award for Peace from the American Public Health Association. And to the right of Yara, we have Bilal Irfan. He is a bioethicist who conducts research at Harvard Brigham and Women's Hospital and the University of Michigan. His ongoing work spans conflict and health, epidemiology, culturally conscious care, Alzheimer's and dementia care, infectious disease, orthopedic trauma, sleep health, and the intersection of policy, innovation, technology, and healthcare delivery. Irfan collaborates with Palestinian medical students and physicians in East Jerusalem, the West Bank, and Gaza in documenting the ongoing healthcare crisis. And we have Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Aguilera. He is a retired US Special Forces officer who has provided 25 years of service in the United States Army. He is also a whistleblower, and he previously worked and quit working at the Israel and US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, 8 hubs. And to my left, Dr. Wissam Samara is an assistant director at the Business and Economic Research Center at the Al-Quds Open University, Ramallah, in Palestine. He has written extensively on economic growth and development in Palestine. So for our panel on global health failure in the prevention of genocide and weaponization of disease, one of the questions I think that really comes to mind is not just how has global health or humanitarian health failed, or rather, how has it worked perfectly as it was designed to create the conditions we are seeing in Gaza amounting to genocide? And what are the lessons for early intervention for prevention of genocide? I'll welcome any of the speakers to start the conversation or discussion.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay. So first, I just want to say how grateful I am to the organizers. I think all of us right now needed this kind of space to gather and be in community. So I'm very grateful to be here and be invited. And part of the reason I'm so grateful is because I think many of our other global health, public health institutions, groups, professors, mentors have really failed us in this moment. And we feel that very viscerally. Now, this is not necessarily a new problem. I think Yuping, you in your framing, you say, is this a failure or is this working as intended? And if it's not working as intended, you would not know that, because this has kind of been the trajectory of global public health when it comes to any fragile setting. Dr. Nadal talked about, prevention, and in the public health model, we talk about primary prevention, secondary prevention, tertiary prevention, right? So as they have worked so far. I think part of our work in this moment, and for not just Palestinians, but for marginalized people across populations that are suffering collective punishment, mass atrocities, is how do we go beyond biomedical, the depoliticize? I have so many medical colleagues who will tell me still today how sad they feel about the humanitarian situation, as they call it, the crisis, the humanitarian crisis, and it is that, but are completely unwilling to engage with the why, or unwilling to mention a perpetrator, or unwilling to talk about the situation pre-October 7th. The Gaza Strip was, there was a 2012 UN report that said it would be unlivable by 2020. That was 2012. That came and went. There was no intervention there. There was no meaningful study of how home demolition affect health in the West Bank. How does settlement expansion? How does the pollution from settlements? How does driving from one state to another and seeing soldiers pointing guns at your car everywhere you go in the West Bank? How does the inability for medical students in Gaza to leave to train for cancer training? A litany of things that we could have met at the primary prevention level, but did not. And for some, that was because of fear of controversy, fear of perceived of not being balanced. And for others, it's because they didn't know. But I think our role now, we have seen that this is the natural progression of that unwillingness to really tangle with the political, socio-political determinants of Palestinian health. I'm so grateful to this group for doing that. And I think this is a wake-up call for all global health, public health. You cannot help marginalized communities, whether they're in Michigan or in Palestine or in Syria or in Sudan, without engaging with the lived experience of their lives, whether it's uncomfortable or not. So that is the work that we have to do, broadly speaking, I think, as a discipline.
First of all, thank you so much to the organizers as well. I'm very grateful to be here. And we're near at 12, but some of the other people on this panel. I don't think I'll be able to play anything that close you to young up. But just to kind of jump off some of the points that you made, I think what we see is in a lot of, at least anyone who's had experience in like publishing in medical journals or in the academic space, there's always this push to not name the perpetrator. They will use the passive voice, and many times I read sentences, it will be like, hospitals were bombed. Who bombed? Children are dying. How are they dying? And it will almost seem like a very sad, tragic disaster. You would almost think a flood came, with the way that these are sometimes written in medical journals. And there's complicity at every level of this, right? There's the editors that are involved in this, there's reviewers, but it also speaks and reflects the larger medical community, the larger medical establishment. And these journals and these spaces are just kind of snapshots of this larger trend. And another thing, as you were mentioning, Yara, about the lack of naming of the socio-political determinants of health, that is something that's key. I mean, just a few days ago, there was someone that approached me about writing something together about the famine in Gaza. And they said that they've done a lot of research about famines across the world, in different parts in South Asia, historically, in the Netherlands, and in different parts of the world. But they said, I'd really like to write about the famine in Gaza, but let's not get into the politics about it. So how did the famine happen?
It's your toilet paper.
Yeah, and this person was, I'm not gonna get too specific, but planning to write something really long. And I asked them, and I said, so do you agree that it's a genocide? And they're like, I've heard of these sort of things, but I'm not really comfortable writing about it. And then this is why spaces like DAG and us organizing like this are so important. Because we have to name it, we have to write it every single time. We just had a piece that was accepted, surprisingly, a few days ago, and it talks about the complicity of the medical NGO system, this whole humanitarian system that goes into Gaza. And while they do some really positive things, at the same time, they're reinforcing Israel's control over Gaza. Anyone that enters Gaza has to go through COGAT's permission. And so we name kind of the issue because a lot of people don't speak up. A lot of doctors that do go to Gaza, they come back and say, well, I want to return to Gaza, so let's not call it a genocide. Let's not go on the news and talk about what's happening. And this balancing act serves Israel's interests many times, right? Israel does publish on its own websites, and COGAT's websites, you'll see our humanitarian efforts, and it's going to be different medical NGOs that have offered medical supplies over there. So that is a huge thing that we do have to grapple with, even when we do provide care in Gaza or the West Bank, or we do involve ourselves in Palestine directly or indirectly. How are we using the systems that are built to do this sort of oppression? And when do we navigate within those spaces? When do we work outside of those spaces? So, yeah.
I think it's important to understand and realize that what is happening in Gaza is by design. The famine, the breakdown of every type of service, health, education, religion, every service you can imagine, the infrastructure, the homes, the schools. It's by design. This is not the progression of a war from October 7th, and this is just the nature of the war. It is by design. The dehumanization, it starts there. The famine is designed through the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation as its tool to further implement displacement and famine, to further dehumanize Palestinians. The bombing of hospitals, they're targeted. They're deliberately targeted. Something that stuck out to me in Gaza was that in the south, in Rafah, every hospital in Rafah that went to visit is gone. In central Gaza, they're gone. Each hospital is being systematically targeted. But the Al Kuwaiti hospital in Rafah, which has never completed construction, which has all the same infrastructure characteristics that the Israelis say houses mosques. Well, they didn't blow that one. They're using it as a headquarters. The Israeli forces have moved in, and they're using the Al Kuwaiti hospital as a headquarters for their artillery unit and for their forces in southern Gaza. That's shameful that the world is standing by and watching. The great institutions of our world, of our country, are failing us, are failing humanity, because they are compromised by multitude of factors, but we have to call it by its name. It is a genocide. It is by design. This is the intent, the plan to completely eradicate any human services for Palestinians is intentional. To think anything different is inhumane. I've seen it. The forced displacements of people from their homes right now, as we speak. Every survivor in northern Gaza and in Jabalia, in Operation Green Chariots 2, as the offensive moves north, every survivor is being displaced to the far edge of the south. That's a 20 to 26 kilometer mile, or 20 to 26 kilometer movement on foot with nothing. The video that you see coming out of Gaza with families taking all their belongings on a cart or a vehicle, that is real. As they leave Gaza City and the buildings behind them fall from American bombs. Right now, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the United States of America, your tax dollars, are funding a concentration camp. A 2.7 kilometer area concentration camp in southern Gaza that serves to house all of the displaced Palestinians from the north. There's no running water, open sewage, there's no electricity, there's no healthcare services, there's no services provided at all. As healthcare professionals, you can only imagine what that is going to lead to in short order. And all that is by design. And the United States government is a clear and complicit partner in it. And when I went to Congress and spoke to members of Congress with Doctors Against Genocide and on my own, most of our representatives, our lawmakers that we elect that work for us, our lawmakers in Congress work for us. Every one of them said, we know, We know, and there's nothing we can do about it. We know, and there's nothing we will do about it. We know, and we don't really care. We're busy. Those of you that were with me from Doctors Against Genocide and Humanitarian last week, those are pretty much the answers. We got a lot of stuff going on. The senator knows, but they got other stuff. What is happening in Gaza is a stain on humanity. Believe that. And we collectively, as a society, are part of that. Every voice matters. Every petition matters. Every protest matters. Every voice that called this by its name because of the genocide matters. Evil wants us to not call it by its name. Evil wants us to give it excuses. It's not a genocide, but genocide. Period. Every institution that we hold a value in the world has called it that. Professions, doctors, lawyers, surgeons, and medical professionals and UN workers getting out to come home and say, look at what's happening. Or ignore it and ask yourself why. How, money, some religious vision of a Zionist future. Disgusting. And it's happening. In the coming weeks, we will see it. We're already seeing it every day with the entire population being moved from the north to the south. So stay vigilant. Don't believe the lies. Think for yourself and realize that your voice matters.
Thank you all for your wonderful interventions, and I really hope how the genocide in Gaza and Palestine is a moral issue and question. Because Islam has also studied extensively the systems of economy in Palestine, I want to pose to him an additional question. How is Israel transforming the Palestinian economy to a genocide?
Salam alaikum. I would like to start with saying, may Allah help Palestinians. I want to share with you my own feelings with a historical background. I started out in the US field, of educated field. I got a degree, and I was teaching at American University in Washington, D.C. I love Washington, I still love. But after 10 years of teaching, I got bored. So I said, man, I want to do something different. I want to do research. I always love research. So I said, okay, let me call some people, within teaching and networking. I was able to get a job in the West Bank, in Al Quds Open University. Now, a lot of people would say I was great, leaving the US and going to the West Bank. Now, I want to tell you, I did not do it out of only, I want to go somewhere else. No, I got a better job. I also want to research. So I went. When I went there, I used to love jogging and travel, right? In the US, you travel a lot. The first thing when I went there, if you think about the West Bank, now, I've been to Gaza one time, because Gaza works. There's no airport in the West. Every time you want to go somewhere, travel, you have to cross the border through Jordan, which is a very aggravating process, and then you have access to the airport. Now, when I went there, I was, man, that's a problem, I'm not used to this. Every time when I travel in the US, let's say I want to come to Michigan, the airport's right there, 5 minutes from there. That was my first concern. But I said, I might, I'll go through the agony, go to Jordan, and then I can travel. My other love was jogging. I used to love jogging. I said, okay, how am I going to do that? And it was, right? Now, in Ramallah, there's a very nice trail, like in a park next to, and Ramallah, very nice actually. You can go jog. I used to go there on Thursday, nobody's there. I run as much as I want. Now, living there, I started discovering how freedom, you lacking freedom is not easy, right? Not easy not to live. It's not easy not to do what you want whenever you want, not whenever someone else wants, right? And then when I started going my life more and more, they only from tear gas. They said Israelis tear gas, and I smelled them a lot. And it smells, the whole place will smell. Now, when I started doing my research, after a while, they said they discovered natural gas on the shore of the Mediterranean. So as an economist, gas is important. That's a very big resource. So I was like, okay, gas has no shore. How is Israel now going to take over that shore? I knew at that time that this is the beginning of a long journey. But I didn't know as an economist, how does Israel get rid of the indigenous population in Gaza and take over the shores of Gaza? Now, apparently, when I started working and doing my research, I got sick. Now, nobody knows what I have, but the doctors suspect that I was subjected some kind of chemical. I smelled the chemical. They told me you have some chemical. I said, yes, I've done a lot of tear gas. So my body reacted in a different way and attacked my nerves. So that's what raised me from my research at that time. But then I got sick, I got busy with my sickness and all that. And at the same time, I started seeing how Israel was. I was like, that's how Israel is. Okay. What Israel is doing is, Palestinians were able to create a semi-independent economy, which of course is dependent on Israel, right? So the Palestinian economy was constantly dependent on the Israeli economy. But Israel wanted a step forward, get rid of that economy. How? How can they transform that economy into solid economy? The answer is easy. They transform it to a genocide. No, it's a genocide. A genocide economy is an economy, right, that promotes genocide. Now, how do you do that? Two things, very easy, right? You hit how do people, what do people need? People need to eat, drink, right? Medical system, education system, and have destroy all those. And that's what they did. From our open university, we had 3 campuses in Gaza. They were all destroyed. We have 2,000 now students who our university now are funding, like they're not paying, of course, their tuition, but we are teaching them online. Try what? Try not to deteriorate the education system in Gaza, because it's important to keep the health system and the education system. You don't want to have an ignorant generation, right? Because having an ignorant generation destroy what the Palestinians are known for. What's our basic resource? What our most valuable resource in Palestine? We don't have oil, we don't have gas. Well, we started having some natural gas, but our number one resource is the human capital. In Palestine, we are known, or Palestinians are known within that area for our human capital. We are mostly educated, all of us are educated, we are hard workers. So whatever they say, okay, let's exploit that resource that they have, the most vital resource that they have, because that's the only thing that they can do, right? They destroyed the state. They did not allow the state, a physical thing, not the state in theory, physically on the ground. But the thing that we're not able to destroy is our what? Is our human, our dedication. Through humanity, through our humans, through Palestinians, we're able to create what? A state. We were able to do a lot of things. So the Israelis said, okay, now they took the land, right? They took our resources. Now what's left was taking the humanity. And that's what they did. And I think to answer the question that you posed, or panelists posed, how do you recognize that challenge? I'll tell you. When you see resource, when the natural gas is discovered on the shore of Gaza, you know now, like all my concepts, especially here on my lab, money, money is there, right? Why is why is now all of a sudden Trump's interested and he wants Gaza to be here? Gaza has been there for a long time, right? But nobody ever cared about it. Why now? Because money, dollars, right? They call it natural gas. So now, once natural gas was created, now the trick is how do you get rid of those conditions? So remember, the gas population is only what? 2,025,000. That's not a lot of people to move around, right? It's not that hard. So the thing is, now of course the World Bank deals with a lot of issues. The World Bank is dealing with the expansion of settlements, and the World Bank is being exhausted by the settlements. Now in Gaza, right, there's no settlement. Now this was the double-edged sword. The fact that no settlements in Gaza. One, it's hard to get rid of, but at the same time, it's easy to get rid of. Why? Because there's no settlements. You can do whatever you want, right? So you can do whatever you want. Create, isolate them, right? Create a prison, surround them, and they get rid of them. How do you get rid of them? You transform the economy into a genocide economy, right? You destroy the health system, you destroy the education system, you destroy the inhabitants. You make it unlivable. And that's what I do. They make it unlivable. And how do we recognize it? I'm sorry I keep repeating. As soon as natural levels, that's a lot of levels, right? You can't ignore that. It's like oil, have it in the shore. Now the whole thing changed. How do we know? I think it might not a genocide will happen when you have a lot of dollar signs. When a lot of dollar signs pop up, then the evidence is in that area. And as soon as you're in that area, if there's indigenous people or there's a few land, you can get them. It's not as hard, right? Too many people not going to be. We can get rid of half of that, and the rest will run. I don't want to take too much of your time. Thank you.
So we've heard from our panelists, I think, a very compelling overview of how this was not a failure, but it was by design. That we live in a world where capital and money and political power, these interests supersede the right to life, the right to dignity, the right to self-determination and liberation. I will turn it back to my panelists around any kind of reflections that you might have around weaponization of disease or illness or starvation or starvation. And maybe we can do another round of giving from each of our panelists, and then maybe we can turn it to the audience for some questions.
Hello, yeah. So I'm gonna very quickly read from the official definition of genocide, right? One of the five acts. Deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. So if you were teaching an epidemiology class and you wanted to create a case study to create the most injury and disease you possibly could, would it be very different than what we're seeing in Gaza right now? Destroy infrastructure, health infrastructure, kill medical workers at a rate disproportionate to the killing of the regular population, kidnap the rest of them, delegitimize the entire health system as somehow captured, forced displacement, not twice, not 4 times, but 10 times, 15 times, 20 times, into smaller and smaller and smaller areas that are overcrowded, a lot of young children, a lot of elderly people, people with disabilities that are getting no health care, not just people who have traumatic injuries, but people who have cancer, people who need dialysis, people with diabetes, people with asthma, from serious to, you know, everyday ailments that we could all deal with. It's basically eliminate all vaccination programs because people are displaced and moving around. There's not a lot of humanitarian agencies. That's how we got a polio outbreak. You know, limit access to food, to water, to electricity. I mean, I don't have to keep doing this. I think you guys see where I'm going. How can we not see that as intentional and systematic and as use of a weapon? It is quite literally inflicting on this group, the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, conditions that are going to kill them or cause at the least long-term disability and longer term mental health burden that will be, you know, very difficult for us to ever kind of treat or intervene with. So I think the lessons learned from the you know, land seizures and the various acts of violence in the West Bank, the lessons learned from bombing Gaza in 2008 and 2012 and 2014 and 2021, and every single one of those instances, hospitals and health centers were bombed. During COVID, the May 2021 bombing, the COVID hospitals were bombed. This is not, you know, at this point, to see this as the Israelis put it, as accidents, which they love to say, bad intelligence, or this particular, you know, blaming individual soldiers or individual groups, rather than seeing it as a systematic thing that has happened. And this is the problem when we keep resetting the date upon when do we start looking at the situation. Because if you look at, you know, the pre-1948, we don't even have time to get into that, but look at the post-occupation 1967 period. That was a distinct period. The period after the first Intifada, the period after the Oslo Accords, the period after the second Intifada. In every single one of these stages, we have seen more and more restrictions, more and more violence, and more and more impunity. How can you allow all of those trends to happen and not expect what we are seeing today? And for many, many Palestinians and allies have been calling it incremental genocide, structural genocide for many, many years and decades before this. We are now at this kind of peak, you know, we are seeing humanitarian organizations, human rights organizations, now we're seeing senators and actors and actresses, they're all calling it now genocide, many of them 2 years in. But this is not possible without the many, many seeds, the many, many foundations that have been planted and built and sustained and enabled and funded and defended by not just the Israelis, but its allies over time. So this is literally what weaponization of the social sector, not just health, but also food and education, etc., would look like. How can this not be the textbook case? Now, people don't like to call it as such because, it's, again, in our field especially, they don't like to assign culpability to perpetrators. Bilal said, this is if a tsunami just came in and caused all of this. Even in reports from people, I think that are mostly allied with us, groups that are allied with us, we often will see a whole press release about an aid convoy that was bombed or this or that. The word Israel is not mentioned once. This is also as a result of trends in journalism and in reporting and what we're seeing in editorial journals. All of this has led us to this point, and we cannot intervene meaningfully with beyond just the humanitarian response, which is so overwhelming, but in preventing this from happening to the Palestinians again, from preventing this from happening to other marginalized groups. You know, Palestine, as we've always said, as my parents told me, as their parents told them, not in this phrasing, but is the canary in the coal mine for all of it, for authoritarianism, for digital surveillance, for land seizure, for lack of indigenous rights. All of it is, Palestine is the microcosm. So if we allow this to perpetuate, and we have, it is happening, it's happening right now. I don't personally see and anytime soon anything positive. Look at the West Bank now, it's going to be annexed undoubtedly. I mean, this is a process that has been predicted by Palestinians and allies for as long as Palestinian scholarship has existed. So for us to now say, well, look at this, how did this happen? What a disaster. It is very disingenuous, and it serves Israel's interests to act as though this is a newly emerging problem that has a solution that simply, we just haven't gotten there yet. There's simple solutions to all of these things, and the root cause is where it all stems from. And so, you know, as early as December 2023, Human Rights Watch called it weaponization of starvation. That report came and went with no intervention. Now we have famine. That's just one tiny example of how these things were allowed to get to this point. So I find myself very frustrated with these institutions who are now so concerned and yet have nothing to say about how Israel and their ministers are increasingly bragging that this is what they're doing. That's the other thing, right? This is the other aspect of the Genocide Convention and intentionality. And that's the hardest, most difficult point to prove. That's why despite so many cases of mass atrocity, and we don't have any official designations of genocide because of this intent, Israeli ministers are basically telling us at this point that these are what their goals are. So what is stopping our institutions from, don't even listen to us, listen to them, listen to what they're saying. It's a cognitive dissonance that is, I think, are hard for all of us to contend and live with, and yet we simply must, because as our colleagues in Gaza and across the West Bank said, they need us too. And so let's keep doing that.
Daniela. I'm gonna just try to connect some of the points that the other speakers raised. You know, just one thing when we're talking about these hospitals, and you know, you mentioned that there's no hospitals in Rafah left. It reminds me when I'm working with people in Gaza, and you have the affiliation next to their name, a hospital, and that hospital doesn't exist anymore, right? Or it's out of service, or they've been displaced from it. Like a few days ago, I was working with someone and they had the European Gaza hospital listed over there, which was a hospital that was bombed in May 2025 and is now out of service. And similarly, at the Al-Shifa hospital was put out of service. It is really sad when you see that's part of the trying to make life so unlivable that you have to be constantly reminded that you are attached to a hospital that doesn't exist. And even though we say that, oh, you know, the university lives on or the hospital lives on in the people, at the end of the day, the physical institution is gone. They're not serving patients in those places. So that's definitely something that just comes to mind when we talk about this. And another thing that Yara and you as well raised is that when we talk about these institutions, I think you used the phrase "we hold a value," and the institutions that they are calling it genocide now. But the institutions that aren't calling it genocide now, why do we hold them a value? Why do we care anymore to get them to call it genocide? I think that is part of the shift that we need to have. And that's why I'm so encouraged that DAG is also trying to make its own journal. We need to move away from trying to consistently try to get what I would call just open genociders to change their perspective. People, as you're alluding to, there's a cognitive dissonance. But a part of that is it's not just a cognitive dissonance. A lot of people are unabashed genociders, and we have to contend with the fact that colleagues in the healthcare space do support genocide. It's hard for us to believe that sometimes, that people who may live normal lives and act normal in every other way, quote unquote. But they are supporting genocide, or they are aiding and abetting genocide, or normalizing genocide. You know, small things I mentioned to you months ago, and we had a paper where we put the term genocide in, and without even informing us, the editors removed it after publishing the piece. And so I mean, there's these sort of tactics aimed at censoring you, and sometimes they don't want to talk about it, they don't want to confront you about it, but there's going to be sly ways around trying to police your tone, police your voice, that you're using around this. And another thing about the genocide economy, but something that comes to mind is not only just the collapse of the banking system, the gangs that are being used to starve Gaza's population. And you know, I was talking to one of the students in your course, in your social medicine course, Yara, and he was telling me that you know it costs a few $1,000s just to get like a week's worth of food. And he was talking about getting a laptop, and I was, oh, don't get a super expensive one that costs $1,000. I was like, save your money. And he's like, oh, well, this kind of means nothing now to us because we're using our life savings to get a month's worth of food. So that's definitely one aspect. But another aspect more related to healthcare is something that we see, and it's been in the news, especially in the last month, is pediatric medical evacuations from Gaza. And a lot of times there's efforts like, oh, we need to bring these cases to the US. We need to provide charity care to them. And while that is good and true sometimes, another thing that is part of Israel's strategy is prior to October 7th, a lot of these cases used to get referred to hospitals in East Jerusalem and the West Bank. And I met some of these patients who came prior to October 7th in the West Bank who were referred to from Gaza. And that was a pathway, right? So it doesn't involve displacement from Palestine to be able to get medical care. So these kids that are being evacuated from Gaza, in a way, at times we are facilitating their displacement. We know many times that they're never going to be able to come back based on historical trends. And that is something that we have to grapple with, that even in trying to help, even in these humanitarian missions, you are reinforcing these systems of displacement, of starvation, of controlling access to healthcare and making it limited, selective, and in certain paces. And, you know, again, Israel controls the entirety of Gaza, of what's coming in and out. And that's a huge part of this. And if there's one last thing I want to touch on, and hopefully there's some researcher here who can take on with this idea, is something that we've been talking about is sleep deprivation as a weapon of war as well in Gaza. Something that we don't think about many times. That's part. It's not just the disease. It's not just the infectious disease, the orthopedic trauma. It's also the conditions of life that have been created. When there's a buzzing sound, the Zenana, the drones, that are buzzing so loud, right? That is something that you see, that they people are not able to sleep, and without sleep, you're gonna have so many downstream consequences of health, and that makes life unlivable many times. Yeah.
2 points that I wanted to bring up from my experience on the ground in Gaza is the weaponization of food, the weaponization of essentials, and that the United Nations providing food in Gaza at 400 community-based distribution sites, kitchens providing meals. Israel doesn't want that because it actually feeds people. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation model is what Israel wanted because they took 400 sites and minimized it to 4. And now there's only 2. In all of Gaza, 2 sites. On the first day there, on the 27th of May, we did distribution for the first time. The first time food had run for months. 34,000 Palestinians rushed to the site. We obviously didn't have food. And we provided them with no water at all. No water. At the end of that day, when we went back to Karen Shalom and asked, you know, where did the water go? Why didn't you provide any water? Oh, we're not providing water. We need providing water. Well, the Israelis are providing the water. Oh, really? Where? I don't see it. These type of narratives are trying to just dismiss the obvious. And if we listen to that and buy that at face value, that's how evil wins. I'm telling you, while I was there, I went to all of these points where they said there was water being distributed or water being pumped in. There's no groundwater or wells that exist anymore in Gaza. So the Israelis say, well, we pump the water. I went to all those pumping stations. None of them are operational. None of them are pumping water to Gaza. The Gazans, they collect rainwater. And when they do, they get killed. They try to boil or distill ocean water. And if they get too close to the ocean and off the path of the coastal corridor, they get killed. They don't die. They're killed. They're just idiots. The food. When we first started delivering these boxes of food, I thought, okay, each of these items of food need water to prepare it. And we're not providing them with any water. But then when we look at the food itself and just asking basic questions, how is this enough? How is this enough food? Like what when we give them a box, what does that mean? And be clear, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is not providing meals. That is an issue. They are providing the raw food partial ingredients to prepare a meal with no water. But looking at what's in the box, man, what does this box contain? Okay, we give this to a family, what is that? Well, that's a family of 5 for 3 meals a day for 3.5 days. In this box. How? Oh, there's enough in there to feed them for that long. And I didn't buy it. So I opened it up and looked at it and laid everything out and counted the caloric intake. And if you were to take that math in terms of what they're saying that is being provided, that's 220 calories per meal. The rate of meals that are being delivered, and again, I bought into this too in the beginning of X amount of millions of meals being delivered. I bought into that. And when you break down that math, you think, okay, well, here's the population here's the population of output. You say you're providing these many meals a day. You said you provided this many meals. It's a pretty simple equation. Well, over time, from when distribution started in 2017 now, that's the equivalent average of one meal every 2 days. Remember, one meal is 200 calories. That is designing starvation. That wasn't an accident. That's because someone didn't carry the one or do math properly. By design, the contract that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has with COBA, the coordinating office for the governments and the territories who control everything in Gaza. GHF has a contract with them that stipulates that delivery of food, that stipulates no water, that stipulates only certain sites being distributed from. Every site requires a Palestinian to travel through an active offensive war zone to get to it. The Palestinians are put in the dilemma of starve to death or die trying to get food. That's the reality. The definition of genocide, that is clear. And what Israel will continue to say, well, that's happening, but we don't need to do it. It's not intentional. It is. It is absolutely intentional. And it is evil. And it is barbaric. When you see a father coming to a distribution site with the hope and the promise of food, and he's carrying his dead child, they starve to death. That's real. That's not propaganda. When you see a mother with her husband, or her husband was killed, and a mother pulling a wooden pallet of the rope with her dead children on it, that's reality. That's the reality that they're living. And for a second to think that that's not happening is irresponsible. It is happening, and we're watching it. And what I would say to every American that thinks that this is a faraway problem in a faraway land that will never affect you here, what's happening there will happen here. Rest assured. In the Bronx, in Southern Florida, in South Texas, in Western California. This is a model of corrupt power. And if you don't think that it won't come to a neighborhood near you, you are wrong. If we don't stand and stop what's going on there now as a society, as a world, this will continue. It doesn't end with gossip. It doesn't end with Palestinians. This is not about one group of people. This is about humanity. And the Palestinians that are surviving, that are holding on to their land, that refuse to leave, that refuse to give up. That's real courage. And I've seen it face to face. And we owe humanity every ounce of effort that we can give. And holding those that stand on the wrong side of history accountable. The institutions that won't step forward and call it a genocide should be shamed and admonished. Because they're wrong. And in seeing it with my own eyes, there were things that, had I been told otherwise, I probably wouldn't believe. Oh, that's taken out of proportion, or that's propaganda. Oh, it's not that bad. When I traveled to Gaza for the first time on the 24th of May, and I drove through the Kerem Shalom crossing gate, and I looked over the skyline of Rafah, and saw every inch destroyed. Every building, every house, every school, every hospital, every mosque, every playground turned to rubble. Dogs, wild dogs eating human flesh, of bodies that were left in the rubble. It's real. And it's happening every day. Believe it. And to think otherwise, you're doing yourself a disservice. And for anyone else to think otherwise, tell them. Tell them the truth. As hard as it is to hear, as hard as it is to see, it's true.
Comment on the weaponization of disease. I think, like we all know, that apparently Israel is creating an environment that allows for rare kinds of diseases. And sometimes I think not only rare kinds of diseases, it allows for new diseases to pop out. Now, how do you do that, right? Now, from my experience in the West Bank, when I got sick, I don't know if you are guys familiar, but I got sick with a nerve, something called GBS, right? Well, they don't know what it is, but some kind of GBS or CID, you don't know. But I needed like an infusion every 6 months. You know what? One of the issues I have, that was in the West Bank, we're not talking about Gaza. Making sure that infusion is there, is available. That was a big issue. Imagine, like not issue with my symptoms, one thing, two was the infusion need there. So imagine that in the West Bank. And what Israel did in the West Bank is they throw those tear gases. When they throw those tear gases, for like good 3-4 hours, the whole area was smacked. Now there won't be a lot. I used to go jogging in place where there are a lot of tear gases, and people warned me shouldn't inhale that. I didn't care. I thought, oh no, people are just exaggerating, right? Till I got sick. I know, okay, good. I did not took that lightly, you know. But imagine that doesn't work. So after they got no hospitals, destroyed hospitals, right? No doctors, right? No professional doctors. And lot of water, like no clean water, no fresh food. So I mean, imagine that, right? Without saying anything, right? What would that result in? In our point of view, if you create that environment, right, with no proper sanitation, clearly people get sick and doesn't take a genius to figure it out. So without even launching a biological weapon or a chemical weapon or any of that, you don't even need to do that. Unlike my co-panelist said, it really controls everything that goes in and out, right? So if I control everything that goes in and out, create an unsuitable environment, then you'll die by yourself. Right? Disease will eat you up. I don't need to do anything there. And that's okay. Now, what do people need to do? We need to do two things. One is take things into our own hands and say, no, it's not that I can't do it. No, I can't do it. Now, can I do something? There are three things that we can do, right? One thing you can do is with your hands, the other with your tongue, and the third thing with your heart. And that's the least that we can do, right? So we start off with our hands. See what our hands can do. Can I go there? If I can go there, yes, I should go. Can I go there and actually help? I'm a doctor. Yes, go there and help. We need all that. They need all that. Okay, right? Two, if I can go there and use my hands, let me use my tongue, right? Preach to other people. If I can go, let somebody else, right? Or rally people. Rally people in America, in Geneva, in Europe, in the Arab world. Why are we forgetting the Arab world? Let's rally the Arab world, our neighbors, right? Number three, save my heart. I should know this from. Nobody should do this to anyone. Even so, if we switch around. Do we allow this to happen to Israel? No. We're humans, right? Nobody likes to see another human struggling. So why we allow this to happen, right? In spite of the ethnicity, in spite of who's doing food to who, this shouldn't happen, right? As a human being, we should not allow humans to do such things. Although we all need to remember that there is a part of our humanity that's evil. And we have to make sure to keep that in check. But humans do kill humans, right? It's natural. Throughout history, human beings do fight. And they allow these things to happen. So say, oh, we're going to create a society or a world that it's not going to happen, we're being too idealist, right? That will happen. The idea is to minimize or to try and prevent, right? And using disease as weapons, that's pure, in my point of view, evil. You should not try and do such things. And to prevent this, a proper health system should exist, proper environment should exist, people should fight for it, Gaza should be allowed to have proper food, proper sanitation. And you know, a lot of my co-workers who are in Al-Quds Open University in Gaza, they're still there. And they thought I'm showing pictures of them. They're all now very slim. And naturally, after becoming so slim and not having the proper nutrition, your disease will happen, you'll die. But so I want to say that we should try and do what we can. And I'm really happy that doctors are getting it. I think in this conflict, doctors are very important and they're vital component of the society, you know, and they can do something. So I'm glad that people here are talking about it and hopefully, you know, we should start this if we can.
We've run over time, so please, thank you. Please join me in thanking our panelists for their executive contribution. Unless if there's any like really burning questions, maybe we can take one question.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see who's there.
When was the natural gas discovered? What is the date? 2000?
I think it's 2009, but I can double check and tell you as well.
What was that?
So that natural gas was discovered around, I think, 2009. And it created a big issue actually in all that region. That was a big issue. And remember at that time, Hezbollah and Lebanon side tried to sign a treaty with Israel for the natural gas. So it was around 2009. And I think that prompted the whole thing. You know, when natural gas was discovered, Israel started to talk with other neighbors, and other neighbors were forced then to have an agreement with Israel. And at that time, I remember Lebanon and Syria were talking to Israel, especially Lebanon, and they signed an agreement to border the Mediterranean. But at the same time, at that time, if you were closely watching what was going on, it was known that, okay, Israel has a long arm in Lebanon and Syria and was able to take more. But on the Gaza side, you know, how was it Israel gonna take the shores of Gaza? That was the trick there, is how can they do that? Because under international law, Gaza was belonging to the Palestinian Authority, which then moved to the control of Hamas. And according to their law, there was an extension that they were allowed to go into the sea. And then Israel needed that for the natural gas. I hope I answered. So it was 2000. Then I said one thing just like briefly. And if anybody has any questions, I'll be available today and tomorrow. Please come and approach me. I would really like to, you know, answer anybody's question. If anybody has any more questions. Sorry you have time here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We have one more panel before we take out the lunch. So please, thanks again for the time. Please, thank you.
Thanks for it.
The next panel will be titled Development of Speech, Litter Care, and Development. Dr. Dina Salman. Thank you.
خلينا قدام. Did you still what's up? No, I didn't speak. Okay.
I have like something. Okay, fine. Good to meet you. Pleasure. Are you on?
See the.
All right, y'all, we're almost that much, so we're gonna get our minds. Again, good panel, wonderful people here today. We're gonna discuss all under siege with the care and housing. We're gonna make sure of experiences here, both on the ground and virtually with the care and housing. I'll allow the panelists to go ahead and give a quick intro and a quick conversation of their interested in that.
Are you guys doing today? Right. Okay, well, okay. My name is Abdullah Khan. I am a resident at Detroit Medical Center, and I'm a co-founder of Gaza Health, which is a telehealth platform that was built for the people of Gaza to connect doctors from all over the world with patients in Gaza. And it's a privilege to be here with you guys, be here with Dr. and Dan and every single one of you, and learning a lot from all of you today.
Thank you. So I'm Aki Kunsuli, and I was in Gaza as a humanitarian aid worker from March 27th.
Can you?
Yeah, sorry, is it better?
Yes.
So my name is Aki Kunsuli, and I was a humanitarian aid worker in Gaza from March 27th to June 3rd. I was also an undercover reporter for The Intercept also, and I published some works of my time there. I will talk about my time there when y'all are ready, but yeah, that's just who I am. I think you got put it up, but
David's here. Yes. Hi, everyone. Thanks. Thank you so much for having me here. It's wonderful. All right, we'll try again here. Okay, great. Thank you guys so much for having me. Thank you to the organizers. It's such an honor to be with like-minded people. It's rare. I'm grateful for it. I'm Dr. Zina Salman. I'm a pediatric oncologist. I wear two hats. I work with St. Jude Children's Research Hospital and the Right Medical Evacuation Program for Children with Cancers in October of 2023. It's a very little-known program. We've evacuated almost 1,000 evacuees. That I'll talk about a little bit. And separately, I'm one of the co-founders of Heal Palestine, which unfortunately have been in the news lately, but we do, in addition to medical evacuations for children to the United States, a number of health programs on the ground in Gaza. Separately, while I'm not Palestinian, I've been going to Gaza since 2015. So I fell in love back in 2015. So I've been going there for over 10 years. I've probably been there about 12 or 13 times over the years doing capacity building, including building the only pediatric cancer department in Gaza that was bombed in November of 2023, and then 2 days ago again. And I lived in the West Bank from 2015 to 2020 as well. So I look forward to sharing what I've learned from one of these things. Thank you all.
Thank you all for those introductions. I'll start with Afif. Go ahead and give me kind of your experience over those I think 3 or so months you were there, but also how that connected with your work previous. I think you were in Lebanon before, and kind of your experience.
yeah, so as I said, I rotated in March 27th, and as I rotated in, the ceasefire had just ended. The mass casualty events were really, really just overtaking hospitals. I was with an organization called Gilead, and I was a logistics coordinator, so I'm not in the medical health profession at all. I had actually coordinated with Gilead before on going on the ground. I mean, this is sort of the story I want to tell you is that there was a real person that led my trip to Gaza. Back in March 2024, a person in Gaza City had been noticing that I'd been reporting on Gaza and on Palestinians. I had been sharing voice notes of queer Palestinians even, and they had just sort of reached out over Facebook Messenger. The 28-year-old who had messaged me that day in March is someone I call ES. ES is the name he used to keep him safe, actually. He told me he's a very spiritual person. He was Muslim, he loves God. He wasn't very conservative. He was his mother's son, who he loved very much. And he was so many complicated, beautiful things, but that he was Palestinian first and foremost. But he also wanted me to know that he was HIV positive. And that he was worried that he wasn't sure how he was going to get his medication. He had lived outside of Gaza, so he didn't feel like he was extremely representative of everybody's English was extremely strong, and he had tutored English, and he's queer, and he at no point was saying, everybody's queer in Gaza and everybody's this or that. He was just letting me know that like there are people like me that exist here in Gaza, and was reaching out sort of in this way that was so he wasn't asking for any help, but I came to understand that he really did need help. What was interesting was that he would send me voice notes that sort of blew my mind. He would tell me things like, unbeknownst to other, the world, that actually the Hamas, quote unquote, run Ministry of Health was, who was providing him with his HIV medication every 3 months for free, continuously before the genocide and then through the genocide. And that even before the genocide, this quote unquote, Hamas run Ministry of Health was giving him $100 food voucher every month to keep him sort of, capable of eating, because they thought, you have HIV, we understand that that's very stigmatized, and here's this $100 a month to keep yourself fed, because we don't know that you'll be able to get a job, etc. And so what was interesting about this situation is that what he really wanted me to know and wanted me to report on wasn't that he was like super pro, one government, one faction of the population of Gaza. That's not what his point was. His point was that the Ministry of Health was full of scientists, really reputable people who cared about him and that didn't discriminate against him. He's saying that the scientists under the government still act like scientists, and that healthcare workers that work for the Ministry of Health are like any other healthcare workers around the world. Something so obvious to people in this room, but really so typically, bastardized outside rooms like this. The problem at the time that he messaged me was that the depots where this medication was being held were being actively destroyed by agents. And his brother would have to brave the streets to find pharmacists who had meds every few months. The genocide is getting worse and worse, and his access to medication was getting a lot more fraught. He wasn't really sure that the 1 month of supply he had left would be replenished. And he knew that he had faith because it had been replenished in the past, and he was hesitant always to act like he needed a lot of help because he just never wanted to center himself in all of the destruction and all of the things that he's seeing all the time. It was very clear that he was in a dire situation. He was so I ended up reporting on him anonymously, sharing his sound bites, his story, his appeal for Kalitra and Truvada, those common medications that are treated for his symptoms. And one day, a group from Glia, a man named Todd Bandi, got in touch with me that actually we might be able to help ES. We understand that he's getting his medication frequently, but if he needs more, then maybe we can send a convoy up through our team. The thing about ES, which was really something important to note that I haven't noted yet, is that he was on a walker. He's on a walker. He's on a walker because when he was diagnosed with HIV, he was very, very afraid of getting help. He was afraid of the homophobia, he was afraid of the stigma. But what was really interesting was in his story, while his dad was really rough on him and didn't really understand his disease, his dad's friend, also Palestinian in the same neighborhood, was the reason his life was saved. Because his dad's friend, who was a physician, was like, this is a very severe disease. I know you don't understand it, but if his legs are starting to give out, this neurosyphilis is starting to get worse, he needs immediate attention. So again, people in Gaza are just like everywhere else. There are some people who are discriminatory, and there are some people who aren't. And I think that these kinds of details really are important to know because of the truth. There were people that stood by him, without discrimination and with all of the love that they had for anyone else and saved his life, literally. So what's important to note is that ES is going through this genocide on the walker. He's not a sad or weak person at all. He's extremely upbeat and resistant. His voice is fierce. His personality is funny. And he's a fighter. He's been displaced several times. His cats have been killed. He's watched his neighbors been murdered by quadcopters, and he is on a walker. He cannot move quickly. So he's not able to, whenever he's displaced, it's not like he can just go to the south or go very far away. There's a lot of considerations that his mother and his brother have to make before he's moving, etc. And the reason why I was able to go to Gaza, I'm sorry if this is taking a while, but the reason I was able to go to Gaza was because at the time I was in Beirut, and Guya basically now we understand that he can do that. We'd like to do it in Gaza. And it was really, really interesting because nobody expected me to get in. I've been extremely vocal online. I've written, I'm a reporter, but my application through the WHO and through Israel was greenlit. Nobody was the wiser. It's not like I was hiding anything. It was just really surprising that they would, they reject so many people, that the fact that they didn't reject me was very surprising. And I just wanted to basically say that the fact of the matter is that when we talk about Gaza, and when we talk about what resistance looks like, it can be 1,000 things. And I think we need to have people like ES who are extremely strong, who are extremely resourceful, who are willing to do whatever it takes to help themselves kind of keep moving so that they can help their communities out. Because ES is a pillar of his community too. Like he's also, very good to his mother and his brother who lean on him for psychological help. Someone like ES is extremely wise, extremely divinely touched, has the words for anyone that can make you feel really, really comforted while he's in a genocide on a walker fighting HIV. So I just want to leave you with the fact that we need to take a page from people like ES. We need to decenter our pain, and we need to get more radical about what we're doing here. Ultimately, when I was with him, I understood my own psychological limitations compared to him. I understood that I was vain and self-obsessed in ways that I couldn't have told you that I was before experiencing him and experiencing the collective nature of people in Gaza. Not that I don't understand it. I'm from, my background is Lebanese and I go to Lebanon all the time, but it's just really important to sort of amplify people like ES who are at the intersections of all sorts of identities, who can tell you what it is like to be someone there that everyone in the world is saying, hey, if you're gay in Gaza, they're gonna throw you off a building. It's like, well, actually, that's not true. There are gay people in Gaza. It's not easy to be gay, just like it's not easy to be gay in Florida, but they exist, and in fact, they exist and survive because of Palestinian society, because there is. And I just want to, my final point is that it's important that we handle uncomfortable truths so that we can really actually resist. Because like many people have been saying, if it's happening there, it's already happening here. It's happening because of here. So it's already here, right? They're the end result of our selfish behavior, our capitalist sort of greed, our uninhibited amount to want so much. And it's just so interesting to have left Bethesda and understand that someone like ES, who has so little, feels so full, while many of us here have so much and feel so empty. And I think that it's just really important that when you think about what you're doing every day to sort of assuage these awful systems, you decenter your pain, even though it's hard and it's big and it's loud. Because what we really need to do is work together and work for each other and stop centering how this all affects our personal, our personal feelings, even though it's important and I'm not trying to trivialize it. It's just that the truth is to really solve this problem, we're gonna have to get a lot more selfless than we even realize.
Believe vulnerability when you shared the story of the accident, when you looked at all your work. To the other panelists, I wanted to ask, you can do work from here, work for us from here in a medical way. And what are the barriers you're facing, or you faced, both prior to also prior and during ceasefire and ceasefire? I just want to start with either one of you.
That's an incredible question, and I think that every time we solve a problem, there's a bigger problem that we have to solve, and the layers are designed to be that way so that the word genocide can manifest. But every layer, has a thoughtful solution, in my opinion. And to do any work for us, I think you have to be an unrealistic optimist. You have to have a certain level of belief that is crazy. And you have to almost rest your brain, like shut your brain off, almost in a way like calm your heart and just work with your hands. Just do, right? You don't there isn't much thought that you need in order to work with others because it's almost like what are you doing? Whenever you sit with people, they're like, what you're doing was pointless. How are you gonna bring aid to others? And the origin of Ghazal Health started actually about 10 days after October 7th. And at this time, no doctors were able to enter Gaza. The healthcare system was collapsed. The patients and people were getting obviously displaced, bombed. The connectivity was gone, and we asked ourselves, is anybody gonna do anything? Is any aid gonna reach Gaza? Is anybody gonna like be there for those patients? And I realized at the moment that if we don't find a solution, everybody's gonna die. The patients that have chronic conditions are gonna die. The hypertensive patient not under medication is gonna get, basically an aortic dissection, they're gonna die. We have to do something. The child that has strep throat, something so simple, we have to find a way to get them their antibiotics so they can live. And so the origin of our story was unrealistic. How are you going to connect with a patient in Gaza while being in California? And that's where I started asking friends and family if they have anyone they know in Gaza that any patient that I connect with through WhatsApp. Because if you go on like Snapchat, if you go on Instagram, you can see people posting in Gaza. You can see the heat map in on Snapchat that there's in the GPS there are people posting in Gaza, and so I realized there is a way to connect at least with one person in Gaza being thousands of miles away, because if we can't get inside, we're gonna help from outside, and that was kind of the logic, and that was our form of resistance. And I remember one of my friends actually connected one of his family member with me at the time. And I was moonlighting for an urgent care. I'm a radiology resident, so we don't really do clinical stuff. But on the weekends, I would work at urgent care. And I started, picking up clinical skills through the urgent care. And the patient that I was first connected to was a little girl, 6 years of age. Her name was Jane, and I was able to connect with her mom on WhatsApp, and her mom sent me a picture of Jane, and that's when I realized, all right, we can do something here. And I had seen the same exact condition a few days ago at my urgent care. It was an eyelid infection, blepharitis, and I told the mom the recommendations, and I realized at that moment that this one patient that I was able to help 5,000 or more miles away in California means that we can help thousands of people in Gaza. And that's where we started. And today we've been able to consult. We just hit our 10,000 patients last week. That we've been able to connect and deliver medications to, and that's a whole different problem that we have to solve.
So inspired by people I'm standing next to right now, and it makes me think, are there any oncologists in the room? Okay, one, I want kindred spirit here. Two, awesome. People always ask me what I do, just like sort of a joke, probably I'm an oncologist, especially pediatric oncologist, like, you're at dinner party, people say, what do you do? I used to say I'm a pediatric oncologist, and that is very, every hospital, social relationship, everyone I know, they go like, close the party, close the week, and everything, and you do the worst, how thank you. So I started saying I'm a pediatrician, that's but the reason I bring that up is because when people say, oh, it's funny, you don't have to be a pediatric oncologist or a pediatrician, and I would always say it's children, because we put an IV in and run chemotherapy, the child would be running down the halls of fear. And that the first time I saw that, I was an intern 100 years ago, and I will never forget that look, because that's what we think they can do it. Of course I can do it. I'm just here to follow suit to help, because they're the ones doing the real work. And that is so much how I feel about Gaza. And what I've heard from my colleagues here at this panel and all morning is that they can do the work and who are we to not follow suit and do what we can and put our parts aside and get to work and roll up our sleeves every minute of every day that we possibly can. That's our role, all of us, every person in this room, every person with a heart, everyone who's pro humanity. You don't have to be, this doesn't have. It's a political issue. It's not pretend it's not a political issue, but the reality is, if you are a person of good conscience, then you are pro-Palestinian. It's as simple as that. We're doing about everyone here, every waking moment of the day that we have to do this work. And so, the question again, I want to get back to that, which is what are the barriers that we face every day? And I was thinking about what I was going to speak about in this panel, because I work with HEAL and we deliver a lot of humanitarian and healthcare on the ground in Gaza. We have a field hospital who treated 1 million patients, 1 million encounters in Gaza. We have started a vaccination campaign the last 2 days. We've already delivered 210 vaccines, including polio and hepatitis, which we know are both rampant in Gaza right now. We obviously have a medical evacuation program, and I think that's why I want to talk about this, because I think that's what people tend to be most interested in this in the news right now. We treat displaced Palestinians from Gaza who are in Egypt, and we bring people to the U.S. And I have another job in which I evacuate children with cancer out of Gaza. That's my pediatric oncologist job, right? And that started because I already knew all the kids were at Brent's Hospital. Before October 7th of 2023. I was already a counselor every day with an oncologist there. Mohammed said, yeah, we brought up this morning, we should have been on screen. It's a very good friend of mine because we built the cancer department there together. So I've known him for 8 years. And he's been an integral part of this. So there's a question that came up in the last panel, and I really appreciate that question, deeply. I think it came from Brianna, which was, are we doing harm when we evacuate children with cancer? And that's something that I've grappled with every day, because we evacuated through HEAL, 150 evacuees, 63 children, mostly injured children, mostly children with amputations. And I evacuated 994 evacuees through my cancer job, 300 children with cancer and their family members, so almost 1,000 people. And so I grapple with that question every day. And the reality is, this is something that I come back to every day, honestly. Well, let me tell 2 stories. The first one is the fact that back in June of last year, so the ceasefire collapsed May 7th of 2024. I think you guys all remember that vividly. We've been able to, move 50 patients and their family members to Egypt every day, which is considered something of a success, which is a kind of ridiculous thing to think, but relative to where we are now, it was amazing to be able to move that many people. There are 109,000 patients right now in Egypt who don't have access to medical care because the healthcare system is so overstretched. But the reality is that, that system collapsed in May. And we have to pivot to think, okay, how can you treat people? Well, you can't really get medicine in because there's a blockade, and that includes medication. And doctors have been murdered, and hospitals have been bombed, which is now commonplace. We all get back to Aggie Hospital, remember how shocking that was, and now the Red CC Hospital was on 2 days ago, and make the news. I found out because I was texting on my way to work there. That's how I found that, right? So this has all become commonplace at this point. These are some of the barriers that we face every day. And so in May, we thought, oh my God, we're going to do it every day. Every day I find out about children newly diagnosed with cancer, in a genocide, displaced from their long-term, without food, without medicine, without access to doctors, 1,000 different barriers. What are we going to do to pivot that? And 2 things actually, that is very insightful. I was thinking about these questions because they directly impact my work. The first one is he was talking about the East Jerusalem Medical Hospitals, right? Does everybody know about this medical hospital? These are the Palestinian hospitals that exist in East Jerusalem. Centers of truly excellence. We have the Victoria Hospital, we have the Qasem Hospital, there's an Eye Hospital there, and they're incredible places. And prior to October 2023, I was working very much on capacity building referral pathways that lend themselves to allowing Palestinians to access hospitals in Jerusalem, which is their rights. And a need to develop those systems there and to allow Palestinians to access that. And so when the ceasefire collapsed in May of 2024, the first thought was, okay, can we get patient data? Well, right now, the only way we've had was through the border. And so it was actually through political connections in the United States, believe it or not, that we were able to get through a very covert operation that I think probably nobody in this room knows about. But the first and only child got out of Gaza through the Camel Design process in May of 2024. His name was Napeed. He was 5 years old. He had been diagnosed with acute leukemia. And we were denied with him for over a month to get permissions to allow him to use what was previously a crossing just for goods to be used for a patient. And that was actually what opened up that pathway, which is now established and used every week by the World Health Organization. Libby was fine, he was with his mother, she confided to me that she was pregnant, don't tell us all, we're gonna make this happen, we're gonna get you out. Don't tell anybody outside us for guys, for those of you recording this. And he also had a little sister, a little 3-year-old sister, and we worked the night day, but what happens when you're an acute leukemia patient who get care? Well, when I used to work in New York City, you would walk into the hospital, you would get diagnosed and start by the next day, you had a 90% chance of cure. This child, it took over 30 days to get all of the powers that be to convince this pathway to be open to evacuate this child. By the time he left, his white blood cell count had gone from 20,300. His white blood cell count. And he acquired multiple infections, as you guys can imagine, due to displacement, crying, hygiene, a lack of vaccines, lack of primary care. He made it to a Western Victoria Hospital, East Jerusalem, where they're incredible oncologists and there's an amazing system. And within 48 hours, he's been septic shock due to the infections, the overwhelming leukemia in his blood, and he passed away. The only child who's made it to the East Jerusalem network of hospitals. I'm still in touch with his mother every day. She remains in East Jerusalem, and she continues to face many barriers. The IDF will come knocking on her door, threatening to deport her back to Gaza. She gave birth 1 week after Libby died. I tell the story. She gave birth 1 week later, and she named the baby Mohammed because that was the name that Libby had given to her baby in the womb. This baby was born almost 4 months early. But because she was in East Jerusalem, there was a NICU, the only Palestinian newborn ICU was there, and her baby was able to enter that newborn ICU and survive. And sometimes she wonders if that's the reason that all of this happened, because she had a little baby boy, Mohammed, who is now almost 1.5 years old, healthy, doing well, cared for by Palestinian doctors in East Jerusalem, of hospitals. And because of Libby, we've had a pathway now where thousands of Palestinians have been able to evacuate. Whether you think that's right or wrong, these are children and adults whose lives have been saved because they've been able to access medical care that's not available in this destroyed healthcare system.
I think the stories that we hear from our families and people in Gaza and across the world face the Americans so they just different way. A few moments for questions before we all take a little break and maybe much needed, but
Thank you so much, all of you. This was wonderful. Then a question for you. How are you dealing with the evacuees who cannot go back? And what do we need to know about what is happening and how can we support?
Thanks, Kat. That's a great question. You all probably see Angel Palestine was highlighted by Fringe right-wing Twitterers. And unfortunately, that's led to stopping of visas for Gaza children to come and get treatment for amputated limbs, for congenital defects. We have 63 children for the Palestine in the United States for care. They're not here because 5% crime, right? So the goal is never for them to become Americans or become refugees. The goal ultimately, of course, the aspiration would then be for them to go back to their homeland. At this time, obviously, that's not possible. So the system has always been to Palestine that we would, after the completion of their treatment, take them to Egypt, where they're at least close by to their family in case that border were to open again. They might have access to be reunited with their families. We could support them in an Arab country where they have the ability to live independently, continue, living expenses in our United States. So that's what we've been able to do. We have still over 40 children with their families here in the United States. And unfortunately, as a few weeks ago, because of the largest evacuation that was ever done, which was publicized, back in July, we have not been able to bring any children since then. We are exploring alternate locations. You guys have seen Spain, it's been incredible, and they're very interested in bringing children to Spain. to care for them, as well as other alternate locations. These kids, when they complete their treatment, will continue to go to Egypt, to stay there until we understand what the ability is to be reunited with their families and have that. Obviously advocacy is needed because this is important work. It's not refugee, resettlement, it's not refugee, creation of refugees by us. There's a creation of refugees issue, which is more obvious, but the goal would be really truly for advocacy to reinstate the ability to give children and family members access to medical care, because we're responsible for the destruction of the medical care that we should be tackle, and we're responsible for the injuries that require that medical care. So there is a responsibility by the United States, and I would argue, kind of in line with what Penny said this morning, that this is, it might be American values just beyond them, right? To help people who need that help across the world. I would argue that. And the only other thing I would say is that, after the completion of one of the fleet activations that we were able to do out of CASA, Dr. Sinia was really amazing. So, said to me, Zena, you guys are in this activation and the press is saying all over it, and wow, amazing, great job, and everyone's gonna come and pat him on the back. And he said, Zena, don't get too excited, don't get too comfortable, don't get too proud of yourself. Every time you're able to get a child care outside of Medicine, remember that there's still tens of thousands of people who need care, and as I said, you're working on anywhere for your time. And that's what I would give you all today.
Hi, my name is Ida. I'm a geologist. My question is for Alfonso. First, thank you so much for what you're doing. My family is in Gaza, so I've been in personal touch with other families and some doctors and patients there. And I've tried to help by looking at images online, which is the only way is like you said, like WhatsApp. So my question is there like an established, like with your geology, it's easy to remotely help. Is there an established like program that we can work with? Or is that something in the process? Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the question. Yeah, so her question was, is there anything in the radiology field that we can do